Hi, Jeff here with Permaculture of the Absurd. I wanted to make a video to update you on some of the progress that I've made. Now, having limited access to the land does create some hurdles, but I've been able to take advantage of some time at home, planning, researching, and doing a few projects that I wanted to share with you. The hope of this video is to show you that I'm more than just a random guy cutting cactus in the woods, that there is some method to the madness. So let's get started, shall we? Here are the books I've been collecting. Now, please know that I have not read all of these books. In fact, I've only read three cover to cover. The first one was Gaia's Garden. I highly recommend that book for anybody getting into permaculture. The next was The Resilient Farm and Homestead. It has a ton of great homesteading ideas and resources. And then it was Green from the Ground Up. I highly recommend that book for anybody building on undeveloped land, wanting to create their own energy efficient home. The rest are basically just used as browsing material. Since most of my research is done online, I like having the books as a backup plan in case the electricity, the grid, or the internet goes out. And it turns out in Texas, that's actually a possibility. So, in an emergency, I think that these books would become an invaluable resource for me and my family. I love getting new books, so please recommend to me some of your favorites in the comments. Looking at where to start, my research led me to the Scale of Permanence, and I found this wonderful graphic on permacultureproductions.com. And I wanted to share it with you today. Um, Basically, it is think of it as an order of operations for undeveloped land. I would want to come in, and you start on the left with climate and landform, and these are things that I have less influence on, but tend to last a lot longer and move on a much slower time scale. Whereas things over on the right, like soil and aesthetics, these are things that require a lot of upkeep on my time, and can change rather quickly and drastically. And so think of it like this, like the climate, we are blackland prairie here in central Texas. There's nothing I'm going to be able to do to make it tropical or Arctic tundra. So I have to go and build within what's given to me in the climate. Now I can control a little bit of the land flow and the water. And these are things that will require some work up front, but once they're established, if they're done correctly, these are things that can last for generations, and require very little upkeep. Whereas on the right, things like soil and aesthetics, this would be like mowing your lawn, right? That takes quite a bit of time in mowing and edging. And it's also something that will come back next week, and you have to go out there and do it all over again. So it's less permanent and it requires a lot more work. Um, and so I'm going to start over here with climate and landform, and then over the next 5 or 10 years, hopefully progress to soil and aesthetics. It wouldn't make sense for me to go out there and just mow down all the hay right now, because it's just going to grow back next week and I'd have to do it all over again. So I'm working more on landform and water right now, and that's my focus. So looking at the climate here, I just did some quick Google research. Here in Central Texas, we get about 37 inches of rain. On the property, my lowest point is 455 feet. My highest elevation is 475 feet. Most of our winds and our strongest storms come from the northwest. We do, in the late summers, we can get occasionally south winds, bringing some tropical storms with them, but that's very rare. Our longest days are in June, with 14 hours of sunlight, and our shortest days are in December with 10 hours of sunlight. I also went ahead and just researched some of our records, because I want to know these things so that I don't go planting things that can't survive at 0 degrees, and I don't go planting things that can't survive at 112 degrees. I need to be aware of the limitations in the climate. So once I got a hand on the climate, I started exploring the landform and looking for points of interest. And I found this beautiful cedar elm tree, and I got really lucky. I found it; it attracted my attention because just how big it was, sticking out up over the understory. But also, it turned out to be a really key point to start developing the land here. So here's what I did. I went home and I got on Google Earth and I found that tree here. And then I started looking over the landform and looked at a topographical map of the area. And I found that I have three valleys here. You can see that I have three areas where water can flow at very low points. And this tree happened to be found right here on this contour line, and that turned out to be a really important location. Um, that contour line actually spans all three valleys of the property. And when I say valley, these are just where the water flows across. Okay, it's not like a big mountain valley. It's just where the water flows to, and then the ridges. When I talk about them, that's where the water flows from. Right. So you could tell that these are very arid up here. They don't get nearly as much moisture. And looking at Google Earth, you could see all my big mature trees happen across the property where there's more moisture. So I'm hoping that I could do some sort of earthwork along this contour line to reroute the water. And what that would look like, I was hoping to build a Hügelkultur bed, starting here at my tree on that contour line, building a Hügelkultur bed along this contour, hoping that as the water flows into it, it then diverts and spreads across the property, bringing some more water over here to my ridges. So that's where I started. So I went out to the tree and looked for that contour line, and I started to map it out. You could tell I went with the Hügelkultur bed because Berman swale requires the use of like big machinery and a backhoe, and I just didn't want to destroy all of this established vegetation with that. And I thought the Hügelkultur bed would be a lot more like, if I'm out here doing it by myself, a lot more feasible. So I started to clear the property, and then I went in with a frame, a wooden A frame, and a plumb bob, and I mapped out the contour here. So once I got the markers placed, I went in with a pickaxe and I just kind of loosened up the soil. Then I went in with a shovel and I dug up a trench here, and I shoveled all the loose new dirt to the uphill side of the contour line. Once I did that, I filled it in with the cactus cuttings, all of these little cactus branches down here. I put them in first, hoping that most of the moisture would be there, and it would give me the least chance of them resprouting and giving just a wall of cactuses. And another thing to prevent the cactus from coming back up, I went ahead and I laid some cardboard over them, and then I covered the cardboard with my biggest mesquite logs. Going back and doing it again, I wish I had put in more mesquite logs and taken away some of that space in there. I think I left it too airy and it dried out and doesn't hold as much moisture as I would like. But once I put the mesquite logs on, I covered that with more shrubs and branches. Then I shoveled the dirt back onto the branches and I sprinkled in some native seeds, hoping that if there was enough moisture, they would sprout. They didn't, but that's another story. And then I covered the whole thing with hay as a way to hold in the moisture and protect the soil. Over time, it deteriorated and it fell down quite a bit. I don't think it worked quite as well as I had planned or hoped, but I learned a lot doing this, and I'm going to keep at it. So my plan for this summer is to go out there. You can actually see here. I did this on January 1st last year. I built that Hügelkultur bed I just showed you, and here in January, Google updated their Google Earth map, and you can now see it right there on Google Earth. And I thought that was just really cool. But you can see I missed my contour by just a hair. So my goal is to go out this summer, and I'm going to build a little organic water diversion right across this contour here. And then I'm going to start my next Hügelkultur beds here. Now that I've learned some from that first one about it not being having too much air and space in it, I think I can do better the next time. And then my goal is to hopefully get this done before the spring rains get here and see if I can get some water to start moving across the property over to some ridges. Start small and work my way from there. That way I don't come in and do anything too drastic and end up damaging anything permanently. I want to do the organic dam because that way I'm not trying to dam up the water. I'm not trying to stop the flow. But if a big flood comes through and it all gets washed out, it's just more branches and debris getting washed down, and eventually it'll just decompose. Out on the land, I continue to cut back cactus to try to make room for new native plants. You can see that these clusters of mesquite, cedar elm, and cactus would be near impossible to build a hügelkultur bed through, so I come in and cut back the cactus and I remove some of the cedar elms. I want to leave enough cedar elms growing densely together so that they create a passive cooling effect over a large area of land. I tried putting some of the cactus cuttings into a pile that I will cover with hay to prevent new sprouts. But I left a lot of bare soil, so I left some cuttings on the ground and I will cover that area with hay. I think that'll be better and time will tell. I hope to clear out cactus on either side of the water diversion I build and then install hügelkultur pits along the contour line. It's not all work on the property though. I took on a few projects around the house as well. During spring break, I built a hügelkultur bed to plant some zinnias. I selected this spot because it's a sunny, dry, high point on my yard, and the grass here is always the first to die. So I tilled up the ground, I laid some large logs, then some smaller branches, threw in some cardboard and compost. I did throw in 2 bags of soil from the hardware store and about 100 various zinnia seeds. And then I covered the whole thing with the wood chip mulch. This thing is a sponge and it stores water for days. These plants started out strong and they haven't stopped even through the spring hailstorms and now this absurd triple-digit heat. I water them once every 3 or 4 days. Me and a garden hose for just about 5 minutes. I love seeing all the bees, butterflies, and other insects hanging out. What a splash of color. This turned out so much better than I expected. I also built a hügelkultur bed around my established blackberry bush. For the past couple years, it's been hard to keep alive and its growth was pretty stunted. Putting in the bed, I planted some mint and bee balm, but I haven't seen any of it grow, at least not like the zinnias. I wonder if maybe some rabbits ate the sprouts. I'm not sure, but a sunflower popped up and 2 marigolds that I didn't intend at all. Probably strays from using mulch from the community recycle center, but that's really cool. Honestly, I love blackberries, but we don't get to eat too many of these. Only a handful so far. The birds get to them mostly, but I don't mind. I like watching the birds select and pick them off the vine. I'm cool with just making the birds happy. Hopefully, this plant stays healthy and I can take cuttings and try to propagate the plant out on the farm. Well, those last 2 beds seem to be working really well, but they still require watering from me. So that gave me an idea, and you can see here that I have mapped out a contour line in my backyard. My hope is to till up along this line and plant another hügelkultur bed. However, because it is on contour, I will also build a rock drainage from the gutter down to the bed, and hopefully this will spread water out to all of my plants. The dream is to have a ton of various native plants that I could just take cuttings from and move out onto the farm. I would also like to plant 2 fruit trees in it. Yes, because I like the fruit, but I would also like to plant them to block out the summer sun from hitting this side of the house and hopefully shade the windows. Building this bed this summer is my goal, and I will probably wait to plant fruit trees until the winter. I don't think it would be fair to only talk about the success I've been having. Let's talk about one of my biggest failures this season. Y'all, I am struggling with seed starting. I bought thousands of native seeds in these cool biodome trays. I thought I was going to be the king of seed starting. And then nothing. I started in February, but a late freeze knocked out my first batch. Okay, my bad. So I started some more in the domes, but these grew mold and it snuffed out all the sprouts that I had. So I removed the lids, but this led to too much sun and it burned up my sprouts. So I moved them into the shade and now the mold is back. So I'm frustrated, upset, and mostly embarrassed. I really didn't want to tell y'all that I can't even sprout a seed, but hopefully I keep trying, changing, and learning, and now that it's summer, I'm going to move them indoors and I'm going to order some lights and try to sprout some in a closet. My permaculture dreams are nothing if I can't grow from seeds. For a positive spin though, this tiered table that I built from some scrap 2x4s and some pickets I had left over from redoing my fence a few years ago, so that was fun and it turned out well. And I'll leave you here with a rosemary that I planted at the base of a mesquite a couple months ago. Haven't given it any water and it's still green and growing, so hopefully I'm onto something and I can keep expanding. Thanks for watching.